Good evening. Welcome, everybody, to the Villa Park 2024-2025 Budget First Workshop. It's Monday, April 8th, 2024, 5 p.m. I'd like to welcome everybody to this first workshop, one of two, where we'll be discussing the budget. And let's first start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd all please rise and place your right hand over your heart and repeat after me. Thank you. Please be seated. And Lee, this is your show.
Well, let me kind of kick it off real quick. We're here for the first budget workshop. There's one of two. We're starting the budget fiscal year 24-25, which starts July 1st of this year. Let me just start by saying that the city is and will continue to be in very good condition. So for those of you that are checking to see how we are, you can turn it off, know that we're in great shape. We're in very good shape. We are not facing any budget longer-term problems or anything along those lines that some of our surrounding cities are. That being said, what these focuses of these workshops is basically to give you, the first one, to give you an orientation of kind of what we're looking at, what the picture looks like, and some of the context of the issues we're facing. Our next workshop in May gives us an opportunity. We'll have a lot more data in real terms, and anything that the council wants during these first or second, we can incorporate from that into the final adoption, which will be in June, the end of June. So again, we are in very good financial position thanks to the council, this council and past, and the whole process here is an orientation tonight, refined orientation next month, and an adoption thereafter. Our agenda, if you want to switch to the first page, we're going to be looking at a couple things. We'll reinforce what I just said, is give you year-end projections, and then for this current year, and Lee will fill us in, and she'll give us our revenue assumptions for next year and the estimated financing for this year. Then I'll kind of walk us through the issues that we're going to face next year, and then the council has obviously any chance they want to give us a direction or tell us what's going forward. So with that, I'll let Lee, and please don't hesitate to ask questions. That's the point of it, is to try and let you do. And I will say that Lee has gone to, only an accountant can do this. She gave me 5-6 pages of documentation with letters. I honestly had to wear my glasses to see all the numbers. But she's gone in excruciating detail, and there's all supportable. If you want to see it, we all have it. So it's not just a set of numbers on a PowerPoint.
Well, let me first state thank you for the excellent summary, and also kind of giving the rest of us kind of rules of engagement. I think that's important to give us that backdrop, and I think it's really important that we thank you, we thank our current finance director, our previous ones and previous councils for having really, really forward-thinking ideas. May have had differences of opinion, albeit fairly vocal at times, but I don't think anybody ever, let's just say there was very few shenanigans that went on when it came down to money. And we always protected the Villa Park residents' best interest, and look forward to what you have to say. So your show. Go ahead, Lee. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members, and thank you for being here. So we'll start out with the current fiscal year 23-24 year-end projections. And for the fiscal year, the revenue is currently budgeted at $5.8 million. And with the year-end projection, it came down a little bit under the budget estimate by $58,000. Mainly is due to that there's the federal grant, which is the $200,000 that, as well as the reimbursement for the City of Orange related to the Sierra Villa project, which is currently delayed at the time. So therefore, there's a reduce of a $300,000. But meantime, it's being offset against with the increase with the project, the property taxes, investment income, and the franchise taxes. And on the expenditure side, is the final budget for the expenditure is $7.6 million. And we're well under the budget by $1.1 million. Mainly because on the capital project expenditures, we're under budget by 800,000, mainly due to the street projects, which is the Cerro Villa project, as well as the annual street improvement project. So that is $707,000. And for the operating expenses, the salaries, personnel expenses, it's like a little bit over the budget by $46,000. Mainly we have the increase in health insurance, as well as we also, during the fiscal year with the council members' approval, that we have added a full-time position, which is our planning assistant. And
We compensated for that going into next year, the underage.
I'm sorry?
We compensated for that going into next year by budgeting a little higher
Yes,
for the
yes.
salaries?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. And overall, and also for the operating expenses, for the non-personnel, we are way under budget by $349,000. So overall, on the operating expenses, personnel and non-personnel, we are under budget by $300,000. Okay. So far,
One
any
more
question?
Steve, what, Cerro Villa, the street project?
Cerro Villa is, you'll recall that we were relying on two things. One, we have the scope ready to go out to bid for design. What happened is the ARPA money, the federal government has delayed that with their impasse on the budgets. That was one of the compromises that was removed. So that's, I want to say that's 200,000 that was taken out. Then the city of Orange was going to give us 100,000 for their share of the project. They aren't going to give us 100,000 if the feds aren't giving them us the money for that. So it's $300,000 on a, I want to say about a $700,000 project.
Close to 500.
$500,000 project. So basically, we didn't want to go forward on that, so we're waiting. We've been told by the people, our contacts, the Department of Transportation, that money will be coming back in future years. So we're hoping that we can get it back. But the problem is, when you've got a project you're losing that much money on, we just couldn't absorb it in our own budget. And we don't want to, and especially without City of Orange participating.
So are we carrying these funds forward into the next year's budget in anticipation that there might be future funding added to it?
Yeah, this project will be, it's unbudgeted next year because we don't have a certain date, but we'll move it forward, and we're ready to move forward on it whenever.
Okay.
We've got the plans and specs ready, we're ready to go out to bid, it's just we don't want to pull the trigger without money being there available. That would present a problem because it becomes a general fund liability for the city, and we can't put the city at risk.
Right, okay.
I mean, at some point, when the road becomes so bad, we'll have to take certain measures. Right now, it's a patchwork we're trying to deal with, and we will continue to do so. And we want to move forward, and we'll elevate it if we have to. But we've been told that within the next year or so, we should be seeing, and you know the problems they're having negotiating a budget in Washington. So it's one of those things that's getting tweaked and lost in the crack, and we're hoping it gets reinstated.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, we're going to the new fiscal year. We start out with some revenue assumptions. And these are the assumptions for the discretionary revenue. And our biggest, largest revenue source is the property tax. And that is 60% of our revenue. And we estimated with a 3% increase on the assessed valuation. And that would bump us up roughly about 100,000 increase. And secondly is our sales tax. Sales tax is based on our consultant avenue services, and is currently forecast as 275,000, just a little slight decrease from last year's projection. And for the passport revenue is consistent, which is $7,000, and the tech fees, which is only used for the technology enhancement, and that is consistent to be budgeted at $14,000.
So real quick, going into the revenue, one of the things that Lee and I have talked about, the county estimates an AV growth of 4%. We've always kind of the adage that philosophy is you underestimate your revenues and overestimate your expenditures. And that way you're always going to be safe and I never have to come back to bad news. So we're only going to estimate a 3% increase in assessed valuation. We will probably exceed 4%. Which is one of the reasons why, if you go back to this year, we've exceeded our revenue estimates, and that's the good place to be in. That's sort of the philosophy that Lee and I have sort of adopted and carried forward. But again, the county is budgeting 4% on their budget as AV growth. And in Villa Park, we've experienced historically higher than the county average in AV growth. So we're very fortunate here. We have a very vibrant property tax base, and I would expect that in the future. But again, we're being conservative in our estimates.
Okay, moving on, and these are the revenue sources that are either restricted or specialized based on specific purposes. So the first one is our sewer assessment revenue, and usually we receive roughly about $400,000 per year. And with the upcoming fiscal year, we estimated that will be 1.9 million available at year-end. And the second one is the Measure M2, and those are pass-through revenue coming from OCTA, and is budgeted estimated at $134,000, just a slight increase at 3%. And the next one is the gas tax revenue that is restricted for street improvement, road purposes, and that estimated at $318,000, and that is 4% increase. And after that, that will be the AQMD funding, and that is the air quality management district funding that we usually receive roughly about $7,000 per year, and we cumulatively will have like a $19,000 available at
So,
year-end.
real quick, what is AQMD funding? That's how we purchased the last vehicle. We purchased our vehicles with AQMD funding. So we have not had to spend general fund money on our vehicles as a result. We accumulate this, so it's $19,000. I wish we could find a car for $19,000. We won't. But to the extent that we will accumulate that over a number of years, then we can replace. Right now, we have a fairly current fleet, but we have the next truck in line. It's sort of like it's a process we grow and we don't have to incur any debt.
And the next one is the PEC funding. That is the public educational government access channels funding. So we usually just continue to accumulate that, and we usually receive about roughly $16,000 per year. So we continue to accumulate that. That will be $43,000 at year end that we're projected to be.
And the PEG funding is what we use to do all the upgrades in the screens and the microphones, et cetera. So our next phase is as we collect, and one of the things we have to do is the cameras are older cameras here and things. So we'll upgrade those, again, with no general fund expense. But you have to accumulate enough to pay for the project. You remember our last upgrade was about $86,000 for this. So we won't have that sort of magnitude because we don't have as much to do. But we will replace the cameras, and we also do is we pay for our streaming services with this money. So our streaming that we do and is paid for by this money. For maintenance, yes. Yeah.
Yes.
They're
Okay.
still under warranty, actually, at this point. So, yeah, they're still under warranty because we did it during the COVID years when we were shutting down, when we weren't doing meetings in here, which is a perfect time to do all of it. So we did it all then. That's 2020, 2021. So we have, I think it's like a 3 to 5 year warranty on it. So we're still in good shape. Yeah.
All right. And during the fiscal year, and the city is being rewarded $75,000 from the CalRecycle, the SB 1383 grant, and that is for the edible food recovery. So we have about 2 years to spend that money. And also want to give you a quick a summary about a specific funding. Those are the one-time revenues that are changes from the last fiscal year that we will not have or carry forward to the new fiscal year. Is a LEAP grant, and the $65,000 actually we have received it this current year. So it's all spent. And then also, as mentioned previously, about the two one-time revenue sources, which is the reimbursement from the City of Orange, as well as the federal grant that we won't have currently at this point. So with all that said, the net revenue change for the upcoming fiscal year is slightly short, about $990,000 from the last budget, due to we won't have those a one-time money from the last fiscal year.
So if you're looking at it, you think there's $360,000 that we won't be getting. So we should technically be down $360,000 revenue, but we're getting growth elsewhere. So we're really only going down $90,000. So it's about $270,000. My math is right? $270,000 plus we're getting from other revenues that are going up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's a lot of numbers. So, okay. This slide is to give you a summary of where we're at with the current year-end projection as well as with next fiscal year estimated financing. Okay, we start out with the first line. So those are the fund balance that we currently have based on our audited financial statements that including our reserve as well. It started at like a $7.8 million. Okay, added with the projected revenue for this current fiscal year, 5.7, and then the projected expenditures, which is about $6.5 million. And we do have those we call it like intra-fund transfers between funds. Basically, it's like a transfer from a general fund into the capital projects fund for the street project purposes, and that is like a $500,000. So it's just more like in and out. So with that said, with the estimated fund balance at the current fiscal year ended, it will be $7 million available that will be carried forward to your next fiscal year. Okay, and then for the upcoming fiscal year, our revenue estimated at $5.7 million, and the operating expenditures is like a budget of 5.5, and as well as the capital projects expenditures, so it's $645,000. And there's an intra-fund transfers of about $100,000 that related to the, which Steve will mention, that will be related to upcoming design for the street improvement projects for the next cycle. So that would give us with the ending fund balance for the next fiscal year at $6.6 million. And that is a net decrease of roughly $400,000. And out of this $6.6 million, and $3 million is under reserves. Any question?
So one of the things that we are very fortunate is, if you look at our operating expenditures for next year, is $5.5 million. We have $2.5 million in general fund reserves, undesignated. So we are in extremely good financial position. So for instance, that reserve, if we could go 6 months with no revenues and received in general fund and still operate. So we are in a very fortunate position, but in order of magnitude, we wouldn't want to take from there, because you'll recall that when we had the Mesa Henderson flood drain, that was $1.8 million that we ended up spending on that at the time. We only got reimbursed about $400,000 or $500,000 from FEMA. But otherwise, that's sort of the magnitude. Things can be very expensive if there is a problem, so you want to have those reserves.
Okay.
Well, one of the things, yeah, we've talked about that. We'll deal with that a little bit later. But one of the things on the 115 trust is where we're paying in advance and setting money aside for the unfunded actuarial liability. We have two unfunded accounts. One is the retirement account and the other is a health account. The health account is $160,000, roughly $160,000. We put $50,000 in, so we have about $110,000. If we put in $50,000 again this year, we'll be down to basically $60,000 unfunded liability, which is no problem. Our unfunded actuarial liability for the retirement is in the $1.5 million. So that's below the amount that we have even in reserve. So we're fine with that. We are between 75 and 80% funded on our reserve account. I mean, on our retirement account with the PARs. Now we were up to 82, but then there weren't really good returns last year. Assuming the economy turns around a little bit, we'll be back up. So you never want to go above 85% funded. So the target, you recall, was between 80 and 85. So we're right on the cusp of where we want to be. And to continue to put aside that money, I mean, candidly, a good year with investments, and we'll be in excess of 85%. So I wouldn't recommend any more than that, but I guess our plan would be after next year, when we're down to $60,000, we finish paying off that, then we'll continue to contribute $100,000 toward the unfunded liability. Now, keep in mind with our unfunded liability, we will actually drop in future years with Bill Taryn retiring, because the only one we will have in the classic retirement system will be Mike. Everybody else is PEPRA, which is 1.6 at 55, or at 62.
62.
1.5 at 60, 1.6 at 62. Anyway, as opposed to the higher 2.7. So our actuarial liability will drop on the annual contribution rate, assuming that CalPERS doesn't just, their investments don't just drop. And you recall it's a 3-year average that they smooth, if you will, on retirement. So, you know, I mean, we're still facing the bad years and still kind of dealing with that. It's something we'll watch, but I think the prudent thing is to continue to put money aside. But I don't think we want to overreact to a bad year or two. Let's see where we go, but because we're still in a very good situation. I think we're right on the mark where we want to be. I think we can, if you want to, if that's the council wants, we can look at that. I wouldn't recommend too much more because you recall the actuarial liability is based on 2 years in the past. So we're basically dealing with 2022 numbers. So you recall that's when the markets and things were really rough. Things have improved, and so I think when we see the actuarial liability come out, we'll start seeing it improving. The other thing is too, CalPERS has dropped their rates basically. So they used to assume about a 7.5% return on their investment. Now they're at 7%, and they continue to drop it. To the extent that they drop it, that's why our liabilities have risen. It's not because we've done anything wrong. So it's just sort of this artificial transfers that have happened. So we still have money set aside, but it's sort of like a numbers game. And to the extent that we have a younger workforce, we have a lot of things on our actuarial liability that will change in the coming years. So I think that, quite candidly, we're in a good position financially there. I wouldn't put too much away. It's like, you know, we already have a reserve that's well in excess of any liabilities that we would have. So I'm just not too worried about it at this point. We'll see where that goes in the future. Yes, we are. Okay. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's conclude on.
All right, so now we'll talk sort of like what we're facing in the future for 24-25. First off, as you're well aware, is the housing element zoning update completion. We have $153,000 in our remaining contract with Kimley Horn, which we have two things to do. We have to get certification of our housing element, and to do that, we have to update our general plan, which in other words means rezone. So we have $153,000. We've been working with them. HCD has gotten a little more aggressive, but what's interesting is they decertified a city, I want to say North Torrance or one of those cities up there, where they had a housing element that was certified, but they weren't making progress on rezoning. We're not certified, so they can't do anything to us. We're basically making progress, and they know we are. So we've been lockstep with them. They know what we're doing. We have statutorily compliant with what the housing element is, but we have to continue to make progress. So we have a schedule that we'll be moving on. Our goal is to kind of move forward this summer, start moving, making progress, but HCD will penalize us in some way. We don't know how exactly if we don't continue to make progress. So we will do that. The other thing was the Cerro Villa Drive. We talked about this. We don't have anything budgeted for it, but we're ready to pull the trigger if we need to. I'm not worried about that. If the feds can get the money, we'll be ready to move forward. The plans and specs are there. One of the things you talked about is the sewer maintenance. She said there's $1.9 million. There's, as you recall, every one of you gets a sewer assessment. Those monies are dictated for that specifically. We just did I guess they call it cabling, visioning of the, you paid for it, and they went through and looked at all the volume capacities, et cetera, and they're putting all that stuff onto GIS for us. So in doing that, we'll be spending $250,000. That allows us an opportunity to finalize the master plan so we know where to go, but we have the money to make improvements and doing things. Typically, what you're going to run into is roots, and that's the big issue around Villa Park that I've think. So we have $100,000 for cleaning. Sewer repairs about $50,000 when they get backed up, and then the money for the assessment that we finalize. Street project you identified last month, we identified streets. So we will be going out to design $100,000 for that. So we're already lining up an RFP to get that because they have to do plans and specs for that.
I've noticed that Taft, before you get to Cannon, that probably quarter of a mile off of Cannon,
Right.
Taft, right there, is kind of bad.
Yeah,
Is that in the works?
I don't know that that's not on the list at this point, but I'll have them look. I don't know that we recall when we did Taft, we did from Santiago to Lemon, I believe. It was at Lemon or Center when we did about 5 years ago. 4 or 5.
Remember?
I think it was Lemon.
I think it was Lemon.
Yeah, but we'll continue to look at, I'll have them go look at that, yeah.
I would say the last quarter of a mile, from the stop sign to Cannon, that whole area
From Sycamore
right
to,
there.
Sycamore to,
Huh?
Sycamore, if you're thinking to
Yeah.
Ken. We'll look at that
Just-
closely. We operate on the PCI, which is a pavement condition index, and that didn't show anything this time around, but we'll look at it again.
I'm curious whether that portion belong to us or belong to Orange.
It's us.
It's a,
So, yeah, then if
Everything south of Taft is orange, and you'll see the street signs there, but on ours, that street is ours. Taft is ours all the way through. Sycamore, we own half the street, so you remember when we did Sycamore, we had to get an agreement with Orange to do the other half of the street. So we went out to the median, and they went out on the other side. So it's kind of irregular, but Taft is completely ours.
since that's the case, if you could take a look at it, because there are potholes.
Yeah. Okay, and that the rainy season has changed a little bit, so we'll see about that. And I will alert you to, the city of Orange is doing an expansion of Cannon, and that widening of Cannon, specifically on the eastern side of Cannon. We provided comments based on the residents. We talked to all the residents on our side, because it will involve, they want to put some lighting on the street and light it up better. And it will involve removing some of the trees external to the fences that are out there, but the residents are concerned about potentially the light shining on them. So we've expressed our concerns to the city of Orange, and we've raised that issue. Unfortunately, it is their project, and they can move forward pretty much on Cannon as much as they want.
What are the parameters on Cannon from where to where?
It is from Taft Avenue, I think they're working from Taft Avenue all the way up going north
Okay.
on Cannon.
So is Cannon 100% oranges?
Yes. Yeah. We own, I mean, our property ends where the property lines are, where the trail lines are. So, but they consult with us, and so they send it to us because we're, and so we talked to all the residents. The residents were not happy about this, specifically Parker Larson residents are probably, but they're indicating that there's no expansion on the west side of it, but it will involve lighting. So we've asked them to have low visibility lighting that would reflect toward the street, and there are things like that we've asked for. The other thing we asked for is the lighting to be on the opposite side, on the east side of Cannon, and not on the west side, which would reduce some of the lighting for the neighbors. Nothing precludes our residents from putting trees and whatnot on their side, inside their property, but it's the exterior. If you go drive, there aren't that many trees exterior, but that's what the residents were concerned about. I'm just alerting you to that's an issue.
Curious, any reason why they didn't go all the way down to,
I think it's just a master plan and where their time, their money and finances are available.
I know a couple residents have commented to me about the condition of the fencing on either side of Cannon from Santiago up to basically where Villa Park boundary line is, how it kind of looks shabby and run down as opposed to other parts over off of, I think it's Meads there, past the fire station and around the reservoir there, how it looks much more attractive. I would encourage all of our council members to drive that area and kind of compare the two sites. I wonder if maybe Orange could, if they could be.
We've talked to Orange. Some of that is owned by the Orange County Flood Control District,
Right.
which is its own jurisdiction, so it's
Sure.
another whole set of issues.
Right.
I believe the city of Orange has a plan to go ahead and even improve all the way through the Cannon, is it Cannon and Hughes and Santiago? That whole intersection is supposed to be improved. When and where, I don't have the details on. They're just doing the EIR. We commented on it and sort of, like I said, expressed our concern where it definitely affected us.
100%.
Where our residents, that was our primary concern. So we talked to all the residents. Many of them sent letters, which we forwarded on to the city of Orange, and we've expressed our opposition to some of the proposed lighting issues that they had.
They may have some budget challenges this year.
Well, yeah, so I don't know how they're funding it, I don't know what they're doing, but we've sent our issues in and sort of we'll stay on top of them from there. They were just doing their EIR at this point, so their plans at this point.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Yeah, Hughes, the area, it's on Villa Park Road, on Hughes, down to Bond, over to basically Santiago Creek. That whole fenced area is, in my opinion, quite attractive. It's kind of a shame that, and to your point, the Water District does have a significant portion of that, but if we couldn't create some sort of synergy, some sort of maybe perhaps our supervisor could weigh in and lean in and see what we could do to just improve that overall area for pedestrians and bicyclists and residents of both cities. And I understand there's some costs that go into that, but I think it would also go a long way in potentially not just aesthetically improving that area, but from a security perspective, because that fencing in and of itself is a stronger form of fencing than what currently exists there that's probably put in place 40, 50, 60 years ago that everybody puts the horrific campaign signs up on that, frankly, they shouldn't. So,
Yeah.
and perhaps maybe some trees that go in that area. Just trying to beautify the neighborhood a little bit at a time, even if it's with somebody else's
And
wallet.
I would encourage, like you say, the council to talk to your colleagues over in the
Absolutely.
city of Orange and potentially the county of Orange.
I'll talk to Pat about it, but
Because I think that's sort of an issue that, we've expressed our concern as city, so we kind of need to, you might need to exert some potential political influence, if you will, for them to do something.
And is it possible for you to forward those resident comments about the widening of Cannon that they sent and what you sent to the city of Orange to us?
Sure.
So that we can
We'd be
see
happy-
that?
yeah, be happy
Okay,
to do
thank
that.
you.
Okay. You recall the sewer, we identified a number of slurry seal projects that, streets that we identified, that was approved last month. We have 225,000 budgeted for that next year. We have 45,000 that we have for basically not sidewalk repair, but basically repair of the streets, which is potholes and things like that we put in every year. City Hall maintenance and improvement. If you look outside and you walk outside, the stucco on the wall on the west side of City Hall, you can see cracks and things that just need normal maintenance. So we've gotten estimates. And their stairway, apparently some cars over the time have bumped into those rails and one of them's really bent. So we have to clean that up. And then we have, unfortunately, if you want to see the impact of what, very candidly, is skateboarding and whatnot, look at the stairs because they're eroded there too. We need to fix those and we need to fix the railing and we also need to paint and repair the stucco in the wall. So we put $20,000 in for that purpose for next year. And that's just a normal maintenance routine type of thing, but we want to go ahead and do it before someone trips and falls and hurts themselves along the way.
There was some discussion about a potential generator so that we could use this as a facility for people that needed to come to in the summertime or whatever, power outages, that type of thing.
We've looked at, we're looking at it, and I've talked to Bill about it. There's a number of options, one of which we had to outrule because they talked about putting the generator on the roof. The roof will not support it. So structurally, it will not support that. So we've had to sort of look at alternative options, and that would involve either exterior to the building or in the back of the building. We're still kind of getting, because they're very, very loud and very cumbersome space-wise. So we're trying to figure out what options we might have otherwise that wouldn't disrupt and ruin sort of the aesthetic appearance of what we do have. So we're looking at that right now. So it's still sort of like talking to some people about what we can do, what our options are. We've had the panels and things are older here too, so it would involve a lot of like electrical changes. So
Well, I'm not an electrician, but something like a Generac or something that doesn't have a whole lot of noise to it. I understand diesels and things like that, the diesel generators. But something like a Generac or something like that, I don't know.
yeah, no, we are actually in discussions with them right now. We had
Okay.
an electrician out here group looking at it the other week, and Bill and I were standing here talking to them, and they were talking about different options, and they were going to get back to us on some stuff.
do you know if they had a natural gas line out in the back that they could tap into?
I'm not sure completely.
Okay.
I
Thank
don't
you.
know. This is, you remember, this building is older. Part of it's
Absolutely.
very old, part of it is relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
By new, probably 20 years, 15, 20 years ago, when they did the front part. I can't tell you the when it exactly is. But it's, some of the stuff is very old, and some of it's, kind of, well, the as-built are not necessarily active and current, and that's one of the issues we have, which we found out when we had to replace the panel for the electrical, because we realized that wasn't what the wiring was supposed to look like. Anyway, so we also have a DG improvement. You remember the council approved a contract for, it was a 5-year contract, at $50,000 a year, so we'll be moving forward on that. We've already got the firms involved, so we should be repairing some of the streets, some of the trails that have the most damage from weather, rain and drain type of thing. Generally, there's some council items that had come up in the past, and the only reason it's on here is we are not budgeting anything for Winter Wonderland. That had been there in the past. We hadn't budgeted this year. We're not budgeting in the future, and I'm not sure what the foundation, maybe Mayor Pro Tem Jones knows more about that, but I just wanted to highlight that we are not budgeting or making a contribution at this point. Council travel, it's flat, $10,000. You guys don't use it all, but I think to the extent that there are issues that come up, there are issues with our housing element and there are issues with sober living, group homes, and those types of things. I can imagine us potentially using those for trips to Sacramento. So we're putting in $10,000 per council member, $2,000 per council member for a total of $10,000. Now we get into some of the contracted external mandates, which is probably a little more expensive. Law enforcement. Initially, they came in with 11. Their first estimates are always, I think, intended to scare us. And we're like happy with the second estimate, even though it's still higher than it should be. We're still, oh, that's great. So they came in with like an 11 to 12% increase the first time through. And, after we sort of, Lee and I had our meltdowns, then they came back, oh, it's really only 6.75. Now, 6.75 is higher than we would want. But at the same time, it's not that far from where we were because of the negotiated salary increases that you remember I notified you of it last time. So it reflects their mid-year negotiated salary COLAs. That's the majority of it is. Although candidly, I'm still fighting with them, and I sent an email over to them today about their overhead and how they're calculating the cost per person we're paying an overhead is more than the other jurisdictions. So I'm fighting with them that. So I expect that number to drop a little bit, but we're right now at about $145,000, about 2.1 million almost 2.2 million that we're paying for law enforcement services in the city, which will include continuation of the motor that we have here. The motor guy who's provides our traffic enforcement. Animal control is about all of 2% above last year. We had the building official, we notified, we went a contract that's $13,000, which is a 9% increase, but as you recall, we also lose reduce future actuarial liabilities for our retirement because we will not be paying there. Our insurance premium is going down because we have very limited claims, but really, that being said, I knock on wood because next thing we're going to have something happen, but it is what it is. Engineering is 5.6, which is a 3% increase. Sagecrest Planning we've reduced 14,000, recall, because we hired Justin as a full-time, and then we reduced the hours of our contracted planner. Yes. 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 That includes services as is. There's no change to the service level. The only thing that went up is overhead and their salaries. And so we're debating the overhead and the salaries. That's a negotiated salary COLA that I can't touch. So that's done by the County Board of Supervisors negotiates with the deputy sheriffs. Homeless shelter operation, we're talking about 30,000. Not really happy with this. Lee and I have been participating in this. What we had always operated on when we first got an agreement was we were going to get SB2 money from the state. Well, the state has withheld SB2 money because of if you're not in compliance with your housing element, which nobody is, or not many people are, they're withholding SB2 and then further just withholding SB2 up at the state. So let's see, it's Placentia and Buena Park have not been receiving the SB2 that we're all helping to contribute. So they now want to start billing all of us. We could receive a $20,000 bill as a result of that, and that's kind of unfortunate because it's an account receivable that we're going to have to carry then it turned out, because we're not going to let the state off the hook. They still owe us the money from SB2. But that's something we have to budget for and anticipate that we're going to get a billing. The cities the North County cities are all disputing that. They're not happy with it, but the two cities that are carrying the debt, if you will, are Placentia and Buena Park are concerned about it. So it's an internal debate that's going on, but I share with you that is a discussion that we'll probably have to have with Sacramento because of their delayed payments to us, we're going to pay more out of our general fund. Then we will have an election next November. That's going to be a $15,000 increase that we didn't have this year. That's the cost that the registrar runs it for us, Registrar of Voters County, and we paid $13,000 and change last time around, so we're just rounding up to $15,000. I don't know what the actual bill will be. Typically, they bill you in arrears after that, but $15,000 is a safe estimate. The automated fingerprint ID system is $2,500. The city has an annual share. It's a mutual agreement. Again, it's something that law enforcement uses as a crime tool, and again, we want to do that. Brea IT cost is $32,000. There's a contract. We're waiting for them to forward our contract to us for next year. We have an traffic engineering that we maintain at $10,000. The speed study, which we have to do every 5 years, we will not have to do it this year, right? Or we will have to do it.
24, 25.
24, 25, we'll have to do it, and that's $15,000. The Cal Recycle, we have a $40,000 estimate that we have to implement that, but we're getting a $75,000 grant, so that will be offset there. Then the pavement management program, which it's every other year, so we did it last year, so we don't have to do it, so there's a reduction in $20,000. Yes? Uh-huh.
No, it's fine.
Have we considered maybe getting additional sheriff presence here?
We've talked about it, but I think the sheriff's recommendation, and they're going to come back to, and that's another issue later on down the road, is they're recommending automated license plate readers as a more efficient tool for them to use than a deputy on the street. So right now, their recommendation, if we were to have any augmentation, would be that as a tool. They have not recommended additional deputies because their response times remain very positive, supportive, and our crime rates are very low as a general rule. But as far as a crime-reducing measure and solving things, I think their recommendation would, as a priority, would be the automated license plate reader. And I think the members of LEAC can speak to that as well. But I think they're not recommending additional deputies because they feel their response times, I mean, they're always willing to take more. To the extent that we have them, we have the support. If you see that, I'm always amazed. We pay for one deputy 24/7. I hate to almost say that, but you'll never see one deputy car out in the back. You see 4 or 5. This is the place to be if you're a deputy because it's the most comfortable. So we have a presence of a lot of black and whites for unincorporated. This is where they hang out, which is great. So we have the presence of a lot. And to the extent that there's any issue, we get the support of that unincorporated area very quickly. So I believe we get very good support from the sheriff as far as deputy response. I'm not sure exactly. I'm not a law enforcement guy. I just can tell you what their recommendations are. But we do have a strong black and white presence in the city. And I think like I say, I don't want to speak, and the captain would speak more eloquently to this, but I think he would recommend the license plate readers would be the most efficient tool that they would have. I'll leave it at that. So if you want to move over, we're on the next one. The technology, we will have 2 new council members, and with that, we have the ability to buy laptops and cell phones and whatnot for them. So we have $5,000. We don't ever spend $5,000, but we just set aside $5,000 for the 2 new ones. Annual subscription to our budget system, which is $21,000. We have a permitting system, which has been very well received. We were talking about that today. We had 2 people coming into the counter, and that's all we have anymore because everyone can do everything online. 90 to 95% of our plans are submitted now in digital format, and that's a huge improvement. That's really, really nice to have because we can, obviously, it doesn't take space and it can be transmitted all over, and they respond in a very positive way. One of the things we do, the state is requiring in September that we'll have to have a solar module. For those people who want to implement solar, we have to have a specialized element for automated permits. So we've talked to them, and it's going to be about $3,000 for us to implement that module because there are only certain ones that have been approved by the state, and we have to have it, consistent and being able to connect in with our iWorks. So we probably have about $3,000 there. We also have a switch replacement that Brea IT is recommending. Our switch is older here, and that's why sometimes you get failures and things. And that's just a normal upgrading process, which we recommend is about $8,000.
Steve, real quick, on the IT note, we've had some recent, rather high-profile, at least in the Orange County DA's office case, cyber intrusions where it hamstrung their operations as well as law enforcement throughout Orange County, and much more significant ones outside of the county due to just the mere fact that we don't have two-factor authentication and redundancy with employees' logins. Is that something that we could put some little look into Brea IT? I don't think it would cost too much, but
We actually implemented dual ID
We do have that now.
for that for our
Excellent.
employees.
Thank God.
We implemented
Okay.
that, which is kind of annoying at times because you have
Super
to
annoying.
log in.
It's super annoying, but I can tell you.
We've implemented that, and furthermore, we have worked with Brea IT. There's a service, the federal government will assist us in evaluating
Okay.
our weaknesses. So we're in the queue for that,
Okay.
to have them look at our stuff. So we're actually working with Brea IT in the queue and ready to go on that. And we're one of the first in Orange County, I believe, to do that. So Lee had come back, and she had her concern, obviously, is the financial
Yes.
role. But basically, that's exactly what's going to happen.
Good.
But the dual ID has been implemented already here. I guess it's dual ID is what they call it.
Yes.
For me, it's just a pain and slows things down.
Two-factor. Yeah.
The dual
Yeah,
factor.
I'm glad that you're ahead of my question and ahead of the curve with respect to some very significant agencies. There's another one that it's not public yet, but it also sustained a breach, nowhere near as significant as the DA's, but nonetheless, thank you for that. I appreciate
And we have
that.
limited access to externally to who has access to certain things. So that's also been something we've tried to tightly control. But yeah, we're trying to monitor, recognizing that everything as we move more into the digital world, that's more vulnerable because people don't have to necessarily come into your office to do anything. They can do it externally. And there are hackers all over that do bad things. And so we're trying to stay ahead as best we can. There's other issues that happen out there, and I'm sure we'll have to do more. But I think working to evaluate what is determined by those experts in the field to be our weaknesses is something that is our next step, and I think that's what we're trying to get to next.
Thank you.
Salaries and employee benefits, like I say, Lee indicated, health insurance is $20,000 increase. Workers' comp has a 6.2% increase. Salaries, because of the way we're paying things, a lot of it with the transfer to a contract, we will have a decrease in our salaries with Bill not being an employee and whatnot. So we are also in there including a 2% merit pool. Recall last year we had, I want to say, a 5%? 5% merit pool. So the employees are good. And we also implemented tuition reimbursement that at least one of our employees is taking, and she's pursuing her master's degree, so which we're very pleased that it's a good move for her. CalPERS, I know this goes back to your question, Councilman Pitts. The unfunded actuarial liability, the acronym doesn't make sense. But anyway, it's 19.3 thousand that we're having to increase. That's external. So what we're paying on an annual basis is $129,000 for our insurance. For our retirement. If we're putting aside $50,000 on top of that, we're putting in a really strong contribution on a regular basis. If we were to put $100,000 in, we would almost be doubling what our annual contribution is. So we're moving ahead of the curve, and our rates are going to. Our funding ratios are going to be much better. The classic is going up very small, and so is the PEPRA employees, which is PEPRA is Public Employee, I don't remember, Pension
Reform Act?
Reform Act, Pension Reform Act at PEPRA. It's basically what everybody here except Mike is on now. And that's going up from 7.64% to 7.87%. So we are with 78 to 80% funding, and that includes our Section 115 trust. So a healthy system is anything over, say, 70 to 75%. There are cities inside the county that are between 50 and 60% funded. So we are in, those that have their own police and fire typically are the ones that have the most problems. We're in very good shape. I'd like to be a little higher, but we'll get there. I'm not completely worried about it. So if you go to our next page, our reserves and our contingencies. The city's council's policy is to have 50% of our general fund operating budget. So we'll have 2.5 is 50% of our general fund. We're putting aside 50,000 for our CalPERS, which is our retirement, and then a 50% for our health retirement account. So our actuarial liability is, the amount we have set aside in the Section 115 is 650,000. We'll have 700,000 put aside next year when it's all said and done, which again is a very healthy contribution. Our budget contingency, which we have in there, that is 120,000. What the city council has authorized me, anything under 20,000, I can go ahead if there's an emergency. We do have two issues that came up that are very minor. That one was 11,000 and one was 2,500, and I report they'll be on the council next time for ratification. But that's what we use the money for, is repairs like the street repair, something that had to be done where we had an individual fell on a crack in the street, so we're doing a repair on that. And then we have another fence falling down that we had to do that we just go ahead and do. But that's what those contingencies are. We're putting 120,000 in. We never spend 120,000. You guys know about everything that happens. As far as the threshold, I have a $20,000 threshold. The cities around us, that's the lowest in the county as far as threshold. And it's not, I don't think it's inappropriate, it's very appropriate, so you guys know what's going on. Most entities have 6 digits plus, and I don't want to go there because I don't think it's appropriate. I think you guys, it's transparent if you have something less. And unless it's, $500 or $1,000, I come to the council anyway for ratification so you know what's going on. I think it's very important for transparency purposes, so I would not recommend that we change anything. But there are times when we can get up to 20,000 if something has to be done very quickly. Okay, now we get to the big unknown, and this is the April list, which will shrink dramatically by May and then go away by June. External, we have the law enforcement. They're still negotiating, like I say, on overhead, and we always get a third estimate and final estimate. So it's like a car dealer. You walk in, they tell you it's going to be this amount, and I don't. If the sheriff ever listens to it, I'll tell them that the same thing. But they tell you a price, and then they go back and see the finance director, and they say, "Oh, tell you what, we got a better deal." And then you say, I'm not going to do this, and you start to walk out, and then they come back with an even better deal. So we're at stage 2, where we've talked to the finance manager, and now we're going to get the final offer soon, and I think we're going to get that down. The general fund, the general plan update, certification and zoning, which we have to complete. We have like I said, we have money budgeted for that, but we have to complete the process, so that's sort of a pending issue that could waver in dollar amounts. North Spa, I mentioned that, the SB2 monies that we may have to pay for, which many of the North County cities are flat out saying, bill us, but we're not going to pay it. So we have sort of issues going on there that will be resolved, and we'll see what goes on. Bray IT, we have a contract renewal with them. We believe we covered it in our estimate, but again, we'll negotiate it down. Then there's some discretionary things that we have in there. There's a fencing repair and maintenance that we have Mike and go around and we look at all the fences and things that we have in the city that are our responsibility, and we work on that, and we come up with a number. Again, the number will probably be the range of $10,000 to $15,000. Storm drain improvement, once we get the results of what they're working on right now, the master plan and whatnot, we'll be able to work on that. Median islands improvements. This is something I've had a longer-term discussion with the Women's League. They're always asking what they can do, but specifically the ones we want to talk about are the ones on Villa Park Road, which I think are in need of upgrade. We've done a lot of other upgrades, but they're always saying, what can we do? That's always the first project out of my mouth. Well, we don't want to do anything that expensive, but I would look for a contribution would be something that's where we probably, I think, from a beautification process and something that we should be spending some money on to just make Villa Park a nicer place. I think that's somewhat dated, what we have out there. It always, for some reason, it attracts cars, and cars like to hit them. So we have to deal with that, and those things are really particularly heavy.
Well, and that's one of the issues that I have is I've heard several residents refer to them as coffins, which I don't care. I think that is a little disrespectful to the original
Yeah.
folks that donated the money for it. But I'm concerned that when cars do hit them, that they're put in motion, and if they hit a pedestrian, that pedestrian is going to get seriously injured.
It is
So-
an annual call that I expect on New Year's Day or the day after,
Yeah.
on New Year's Eve. We have one hit every year. It's
You got
almost
one
a
2 weeks
guarantee.
ago.
Huh?
Did.
You got one 2 weeks ago.
Exactly.
Right.
So maybe perhaps something we put in ground or
Yeah, no, I mean, we've talked about it. Those are cement right now.
Yeah.
Those are extremely heavy. They need a forklift to move them. I used to tease Mike, and I still do, about, Mike, can't you lift them and move them, put them back in place? And they also have watering in them too, so they're very, very heavy. And there's a better design
Yeah.
we can probably do. And I think something that would be, the vegetation in there is not particularly attractive in my book. I mean, I think we can do something that sort of fits with the thing, much like what we've done along in the Villa Park Knolls. You see something there that's much more attractive, and you can see, oh, that's really nice. So I think we want to do something there, but that's something that we're trying to cost out and see what that would look like. I don't know. I mean, it's a long strip. It's much longer than you realize when you go out there. But that's something that I want to get some support. We had community support with the foundation and the Women's League.
I think they
on
both
Villa
have
Park.
money that they'd like to cough
Well,
up.
I'm going to have a discussion with Mayor Pro Tem, because I looked at their budget, and the foundation has a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
The foundation has a lot of money that I think
Library
we
does
might
too.
tag team a little bit and say that they had put aside money for a community center, which I'm not sure is in the offing in the near future, but they had a lot of money there.
Yes.
That would go a long way to help us. They did a great job in helping us on the Villa Park Knolls. And there's also some grant money, so we can patchwork something together, but I'd like to see partnerships as opposed to just the city taking full responsibility on something like
100%.
that.
And one of the other things that could we possibly look at, I got a complaint the other day that the signs that we spent thousands of dollars on
Yeah.
aren't lit at night.
Those were done with solar, and the electrical is sort of limited there in some of them, so we'd have to pull electrical, and Mike and I have talked about that. Some of them, the electrical, and some of them are just the lights, So the Women's League, might as well just share this with you. The Women's League has talked about lighting the Villa Park Knolls. I don't want to do that because it turns out to be more of a problem than it is. I'd rather keep what we have in good shape, et cetera, and upgrade where we can. But we have some solar that doesn't get light, and it gets overgrown, and then the wiring starts to get eroded after years. Some of the wiring has been whatever, and then the lights themselves fail.
Yeah,
So,
if
yeah.
there's something we could take a look at or something
Right.
because people are talking about, they come through at night and we
Right.
spend all that money on those signs and.
Yeah, no, I'd like to do that. Like I say, medium islands improvements, I think, is throughout the city. It's not just limited to. We have some that are very nice and some that just I think can use upgrades. The actual RFP for our street rehab, we have 100,000. We put 100,000 in there. I think that's going to be enough, but we have to go out to bid to get the design firm. We have automated license plate readers, which we're going out to RFP on. I don't have a number on that at this point. We know that Orange just approved theirs. And they got 43 standing lights. And then I don't know what else they're getting from that, but we don't know what to bid. And they did sole source. It's very interesting that most of these entities have done sole source. I'm not recommending that for us. I don't think that's a wise idea, because once somebody owns it, they own it, and they own the bid, and you're kind of like rolling in it. I think you have to make it competitive. So I think we need to do that just to go out for the sake of competitive pricing. So we're doing the RFP right now. We're pulling it together. We've gotten some work already with the sheriff as far as potential sites and numbers. So we're working on getting some language from the sheriff about the technical requirements and whatnot. So I would expect us to be out later in April with an RFP, getting them back in May, and coming to the council after we talk to LEAC and sort of go through there. So I think by June, we'll start seeing some, we'll be able to come back, maybe late May, but I'm not 100% optimistic.
The one thing that I would ask is along that RFP front, because I think I agree with you. We've had this discussion. I don't understand why people are doing sole source, regardless if there's a favored vendor or a most likely vendor. Doesn't matter. Just for transparency purposes, you shouldn't do a sole source if at all possible. And I don't think that this is a situation that requires it. But what I am interested in trying to find out, if at all possible, either through the sheriff's department or through our partnerships with other cities, is why they chose to go that route. Is there a technology that is perhaps apparent in one version of an LPR as opposed to not in another? Is there a performance issue? I'm wondering if there's a reason besides something separate from cost why they went that route. Compatibility with future technology.
Which is interesting because Orange had Vigilant.
Right,
And
exactly.
they went to Flock. So we can't answer. I mean, they haven't identified where the intersections are even going to be at this point. So that's
Right.
for us. So we're kind of get limited pieces of information from them so far, but we'll continue. We'll ask them and go.
Yeah,
for it.
I mean-
to the extent they're open about why they're doing that.
Exactly. That was going to kind of be my next statement is they may not want to tell us that, but perhaps the sheriff's department can weigh in from things they've heard around the water cooler, so to speak, as to why things went the way they went. So,
I think one of the things too, we've asked the sheriff, and they're pulling together any technical specifications
right.
that we would have as part of the RFP, so that we guaranteed we have connectivity and
Outstanding.
direct applications that would work.
Thank you.
Homemade, I think several of the council members took tours of it. This North Spa, the North Service Provider area, the cities are all talking about that, potentially funding it. There's a facility in Orange, and this is for families as opposed to individual homeless individuals. So there's a talking of a partnership and a JPA, but it's getting mingled in now with the money that they're spending on the shelter. So it's kind of convoluted. But I want this all to be part of a full agreement as opposed to piecemealed out, because I think once you piecemeal things, it's more challenging. But to the extent that we have not had any beds used for our shelters at this point. It's always been an insurance policy. However, the possibility always exists of not just individuals, but families. And Homemade is more of a family-oriented type of thing, and it's a resource. So what our contribution and what it would be would still be negotiable, but I think that's something that we ought to keep in mind. And I think it's something in today's world we have to sort of you need that insurance policy. You don't want to be able to not treat people when they have the need. I don't know how much will affect Villa Park, but I think it's one of those things. To the extent that we can, we ought to participate. And I've encouraged, and so we've had these discussions. So the North cities are all talking about it because Orange, there's a whole funding plan right now that Homemade has talked about, and that number has changed like 3 times since you guys have been there. But I think it's something that we ought to consider. And when it does get to be some sense of finality on those numbers, I think we'll be bringing it forward to the consideration of the city council.
If I could just ask something about the North Spa. So these cities that you say that are, getting billed and they're saying, well, invoice me, but I won't pay it. I mean, Placentia and Buena Park still have to pay for these facilities to support them, correct? Where's the money coming from?
Right now, it's monies that were already spent is what they're billing us for. It's monies that haven't come, because SB2 is sent like, I don't want to say retroactive, but it's sent after the fact. Okay. So Buena Park and Placentia have already paid it in their, for the shelters themselves. We paid our share.
Okay.
What we haven't done is the contributions. Now, our contribution doesn't come to us, it goes to the county because we're a non-entitlement city. So the county has fronted some money as well. So there's a question about, well, how much are you really short, et cetera. The city that's administering it, La Habra, is not recommending that these be billed out. They think the onus should be pressing the state to reimburse them, because otherwise you're just transferring a problem and shifting who's got responsibility for it. The real issue is the money coming down from the state. So they think our collective efforts should be with the state. And I kind of tend to agree that. Otherwise, you're just shifting on us, and then you lose the interest of Placentia and Buena Park because they've already been reimbursed. I think the issue is the state's got to, especially with their emphasis on, homelessness and things like that, that the initiatives that are coming out of Sacramento, they should be not holding back the money. So that's what the cities are saying is basically, that don't want to pay it is, wait a minute, this isn't our liability, this is the state, and now you're forcing, the state is forcing us to pick up their share. So I think I don't mean to be, I'm not being disrespectful of their ability to pay, it's just some of these cities like Fullerton would have to pay $600,000. And if you're in a city like Fullerton that already is projecting some potential issues financially, $600,000 is enough to sort of really wake up the council. I think so. I think the cities that aren't paying are saying, let's collectively pursue Sacramento, and let's not just, although the cities of, and I don't want to speak completely for them, but the cities of Placentia and Buena Park saying, well, time out, we're carrying an account receivable on the books that's getting harder and harder to explain because it's getting older and older. So it's partly an accounting issue, partly a resource issue, and the money has already been spent. That's the reality.
Okay.
We're making our annual contributions. I think that's not the issue.
Okay, thank you so much.
But yeah, so it's really hard for me to, and I'll be very honest, because the city of Villa Park has never used a bed. Never. So it's really hard. In some of these other cities, like Yorba Linda has used a minimal number as well. And it's hard for some of these cities to say, well, we're going to pay a lot more now, even though we've never used it. And I understand that we all bought into this concept, but it's like you go into a mutual agreement and somebody else doesn't pay, so you end up bearing the burden. That's sort of an irritant. And before we go to our council and say, pay it up, that's sort of, we want to make sure that we've exerted all possible pressures to make sure that people who originally indicated they were going to pay. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think that's something that we ought to be pushing our legislators. The other thing we talked about is that we are doing a fee study. The council approved that. Permit fees, we have a fee study that we'll be coming back to in June, I believe, with the council. And part of the issue here is building permits is probably the biggest issue, building and those permits. We are not recovering our full costs. So in other words, when somebody takes out a building permit, I'll put it really bluntly, when somebody takes out a building permit, the rest of the people who are taking it out are not paying for the full cost of that. The rest of the residents in Villa Park are picking up the balance. So the point of the fee study is to bring that back and say, those who are initiating the expense pay the expense. So that's what we're trying to get at, and that number we're trying to deal with right now. So that's specifically in the building and engineering elements of it. There aren't many other fees that we talk about that we have in the city because we just don't have much. But the building permits and the engineering easements and those types of things where we have, especially with like ADUs and things like that that require extra state requirements now, I guarantee you from an engineering perspective, hydrology reports and things like we're not recouping our costs. So what it really boils down to is the rest of the taxpayers in Villa Park are having to pay when someone else does an improvement project. And I think it's just an inequity thing that we're trying to deal with. So we'll be coming back with that and recommendations. So that study will be in June. I think we've had various iterations, but I think we can expect that. So our second workshop in May, hopefully this list of pending issues is very, very limited or it starts to decrease. And then by June, we'll have it hopefully just eliminated almost entirely. That's our goal because you never want to go into next year with a bunch of uncertainty. You want to have everything resolved that you can. Some is going to be beyond our control, but I would think that as we go to the next slide, by our second workshop of May 6th, I'm very optimistic that we have resolved a lot of these issues because other entities have their budgets they got to deal with too, and they want to have that all resolved. So our next workshop is May 6th at 5 o'clock. It will be much like this, except hopefully more of a final version. You'll start seeing, here are some numbers, here's our sales tax numbers, our revenue numbers will aligned. A lot of the issues we've resolved. I mean, I think we're in good shape, but just some of the things we're hanging on and waiting for. So in context, the point of this one was to give you the initial perspective. Here's where we are. If things, and here you guys sort of say, okay, I want to conclude by saying Villa Park has no debt beyond our pension liability, which we can't, as long as you have an employee, you're going to have that. But otherwise, we have never taken any debt out, nor I believe that's something that we would be doing. I would recommend it. So we've been very fiscally responsible, We also have a very healthy reserve, so we're in very good financial condition, thanks to yourselves and previous councils. And I think that you're to be commended, because even our city that surrounds us completely has got some real budget problems. Santa Ana's got bigger problems. I mean, some of the cities have some real issues that they're going to face. We have always lived within our means. We are doing capital projects and street repairs. Sometimes we don't get as many streets done as we want, but that's because we live in ourselves. And like I tell my kids, well, we're not going out to dinner this week because we don't have the money. We didn't budget that this week. But I think we live within our resources, and I think we also adhere to we underestimate our revenues and overestimate our expenditures, so we're never in a position where we're going to be unbalanced. So we have a balanced budget that we think we can get to with no problems. I think we got some things we can still clean up and we're waiting on, but otherwise, the bottom line today is that we're in good shape, and it's taking another step in that direction. So that's it for today, unless you have any other questions.
I just have one question. The general plan update and certification, do we think that will be agendized in June? You mentioned summertime.
I want to say that there's going to probably have to be some public hearings required of it because of zoning
That's
and the general
what I'm
planning
thinking
update.
about too.
You know, my goal, my goal, and told the consultant, I would like to have it candidly, our updates and everything done by November, basically because I have 2 council members that will leave in November, and I don't want to have to bring everybody else to speed. So my goal would be to have everything resolved by the election this fall. And what that requires is a lot dependent upon what the parameters of some of the elements and what HCD is going to make us jump through. But I think this summer you're going to start seeing activity. We have an action plan that the consultant's preparing for us right now about the specific measures. So I think we're going to probably have to have at least 1 or 2 public hearings anytime you do zoning. And then it depends on what zoning changes and what those zoning changes bring out in the public. You have to do public noticing and those kinds of things. So that could change or require us to deal with it. But my goal would be to start, I don't want to necessarily do something like a public hearing in summer when people are gone. I want to do it when people are around. So my hope would be we do it in late summer. You know, school starts, it used to be September, now it's August. We safely can have probably a public hearing in August. So I think that's what I'm sort of targeting, is when we would have that. And that would allow us time to do everything we need to do and have it done in November. That's sort of my tentative ballpark. I mean, assuming that we get HCD agreeing that we're taking the right measures, et cetera, et cetera. So that's, I hope that answers your question. I don't want to do it when people aren't down, and Villa Park gets very quiet in June and
When you
July.
mentioned summertime, that's why I wanted to kind of get some clarification, because I do think something that important, we do need people around. I would like to see, candidly, my personal point of view, August and then September and then October to have things finalized. I don't want to wait till November for all the same reasons. You know, Robbie and I have been at this for a number of years, and I think that it would be great if we could close that chapter before our chapter on this council is concluded, so that the next council members they can focus on other things, because Lord knows they're going to have them. So.
Yeah, no, and I wanted the majority of the people that voted for the plan as submitted to state HCD and it's statutorily compliant, I would want them to be involved in the phase where we're approving zoning related to that, as opposed to bringing in people who are the 2 new ones. It's almost unfair to say, well, you kind of inherited this, now you got to vote for the zoning issues, and they may or may not support. I think the council did a lot of due diligence on this and has some. So I'd like to keep as much continuity as we can. So that's my goal. I think I agree with you. If we can get something going in August, September, October, I think we can hit that November timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I would say if you have any questions, or anybody in the public, we are more than willing to come in and talk to us or call me up. We'll be happy to deal with it. But if you have something that, like, you go home and you look at this and 2-3 days from now you say, hey, what about this or what about that? Give us a call, and I'm happy to answer your question. Lee's happy to answer anything. And, you know, our next process is cleaning up this and then starting to work on the final budget documentation from here.
We are done. Thank you all.